When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
We're going to be talking about, why was Jaqen H'ghar in the Black Cells? You guys have actually wanted to talk about this, I think, in like the past like 2 or 3 streams. And so if you guys do actually like have any thoughts that you want to add to this or theories that I don't talk about, I try to look up as much as I could about this topic today, just to see the differing thoughts about, why Jaqen H'ghar was there, maybe some of his motivations, after he leaves King's Landing, some of those things, what all that was about. And there's a lot of mystery, and there just is with the Faceless Men, so we don't know exactly what their goals are. Why is he in the Black Cells? Now, there's a number of things we can kind of think of, maybe. Now, with a lot of these different kind of theories and speculation on it, there's different motivations that one could put onto Jaqen. But I do think it's very likely that he didn't, do a botched assassination or some sort of crime that he just got caught. That just doesn't seem to make sense to me. Like, that just doesn't feel natural. Given how skillful Jaqen seems to be as a character, I don't see it as he could have somehow just gotten caught. I think that he was likely wanting to be in there. And now, again, we could see some differing thoughts here, right? So at this point, I'm also going to bring up in the stream, like, there is the idea that Syrio and Jaqen are the same person. Why does this theory mainly come up? Well, there's a number of reasons. One would be, okay, Syrio, we don't see him actually die in the book, right? It just seems like it's alluded to. Arya kind of runs away. It seems like he's about to die, right? We don't actually see it. And so that's something that even in the show, Syrio could maybe be there. And another part of this that's interesting is that it would actually add a layer to why does Jaqen just out of nowhere appear, right? Because we don't know any information. There's never any council meetings, anybody talking about, the people in the Black Cells, like, Jaqen, for instance. We don't know how he ends up there at all. There's no indication as to how he got there. And so it seems more likely that people that are the higher ups didn't know he was in there at all. It seems like he was just, put in there by Varys or Littlefinger, whoever you want to say did it. But I think what would be interesting is that if we think about the time frame that Jaqen would have had to have been in the Black Cells for it to make sense, it could not have been more than a week or two. Just given the fact of, you look how quickly Ned, his condition degrades because you're not getting, great nutrition, right? Like, for instance, Ned's basically getting starved in the Black Cells in his last chapter. Like, he's completely broken down. Now, part of that is because of his leg. It's killing him and things like that, but it can drive you kind of insane. And so I would point to the idea that Jaqen could not have been in the Black Cells much more than, say, someone like Ned, or else we would have been able to see that when Arya like talks to them, right? Him, Rorge, and Biter. He would have had like distinct characteristics of being in there. And so for me, I look at this idea and it's like, okay, it seems like he couldn't have been on there that long. And so if you want to go with this theory that Syrio actually is Jaqen, it kind of adds up because Ned and Jaqen would have been in there for about the same amount of time. You also have the obvious, dialect, right? They kind of speak a lot together. Some of the themes are very similar. Syrio talking about, the god of death. Very Faceless Men-esque talk. Being from Bravos, having that speech very similar to Jaqen, who, once again, talks the same way as kind of Syrio does. So there's a lot of things that would make a lot of sense. And also, this would be our first introduction to Jaqen here with Arya instead of in A Clash of Kings. It kind of builds up maybe this a bit better. But then the next question you might have is, why would someone like Syrio or Jaqen, again, same idea, I guess, why would they want to train Arya if they didn't, already know who Arya kind of was? Like, there's a lot of questions I have with how that theory would necessarily work itself out. Like, you'd have to assume then, because other people have suggested, is that the Faceless Men may know some of the future, kind of like, R'hllor, like the how Melisandre can kind of see some of the future. Maybe they saw Arya as a potential pupil, very similar to, like, say, if you think about Star Wars, the Jedi and maybe the Padawan situation, where like they're able to sense Force users, I guess, somewhere in there. That could be part of it. But again, that's the issue, is that I think a lot of these theories have strengths, they have weaknesses that they check the boxes of. But I don't know if one theory really hits everything. And we'll talk about that, because even the one that I subscribe to the most, which is In Deep Geek's theory, I really looked up videos on this topic. I didn't see much in there, especially from like popular YouTubers. Jaqen is more like a military officer trying to recruit future high schoolers. It sounds very luxurious, but not when you join. Yeah, I do agree with that. And it's something that's like, okay, could Jaqen just have simply been in King's Landing looking for recruits? Possibly. That could also always be something that maybe he was looking for. I just don't think that he would have come from Bravos all the way for just though with that idea, right? And so there's a lot of holes that you can maybe like put into a theory on a Syrio and Jaqen that might not make as much sense. And so, okay, let's kind of go through some other ideas of why he maybe was in King's Landing to begin with. Another idea that people have put forward, and this is mainly, I think, an idea put forward because of where Jaqen ends up, in A Feast for Crows and, dance and all that stuff, is he's trying to get this book about the dragons and things like that, trying to learn more about them for a certain reason that has yet to really be told to us. And so that could be possible, that going to King's Landing, the capital, maybe that was, the first step of then getting to later on to getting to Oldtown. It would make sense, King's Landing would be a port that you could maybe then try to go land wise through the Westeros instead of going around a ship. I don't know. It's just interesting, right? And so that kind of leads me to the last kind of idea of why Jaqen Hagar would be in King's Landing, which I think it's the most plausible, even though I do think it has holes in it. I don't think there really is a set theory on this one that I think fits every category, I guess. Or he was spying on the court. That's another option, right? Let's say that Jaqen was spying on the court for this reason or that. And maybe it's because, if you think about it, well, Westeros hadn't really been paying back, the Bank of Bravos. So that could be the problem as well. Maybe, Jaqen was thinking about, assassinating Robert. Maybe that was his mission at some point. But, maybe Robert then dies, and then maybe something else occurs there, right? It's very difficult to kind of pinpoint. Yeah, it could have been that idea, right? If Jaqen is trying to investigate the dragons and, all those things, could he have been going down and seeing the last dragons? That could have been another interesting one, and especially when you think about how would Jaqen have gotten into, the black cells without really being spotted at all, without many, mentioning it at all. Maybe he was going through the secret paths, that we see like Tyrion use, for instance, or Arya at multiple points, or Varys. That could be another point of it. That would be interesting. But yeah, so let's talk about this one. And this theory is mainly just based upon the fact of In Deep Geek's theory. So I do want to say, like, this all this part of it goes to credit to him. I think this is mainly his own theory. I don't see many people that have talked about this. Even if I looked it up on the internet, this was not the theory that came out first, if you just went in the, the web or whatnot. But yeah. In Deep Geek's theory is more or less that Jaqen was placed into the black cells because he was on an assassination mission hired by Littlefinger to kill Ned. And the idea of it is, okay, Jaqen was not going to get caught. There's no reason that he would do any type of crime or get caught and put into the black cells like that, because again, we don't hear about it. And it happens like around the time Ned would also be getting caught as well. So we don't hear about it. It doesn't add up to Jaqen as a character. So it seems like he had to be placed there. And so if he was placed into the black cells, there's only a number of people that could truly do that, right? They'd have to be people with power and influence. Right away you might be thinking Varys, because Varys is kind of, in charge of the black cells, or maybe not in charge, but he is somebody that has a lot of access to it, right? That plays out a lot in Tyrion's escape. You have somebody like Littlefinger, who has a lot of money. He's somebody that's being able to twist all of the accounts at King's Landing and of the Crown. You have maybe the Lannisters, who would have some opening to it. Ned, before he gets caught, would have had access to it. There's only a few number of people that would have had the sway to be able to put him into the black cells. And so that limits it down quite a lot, because then you're like, okay, Littlefinger, but does it make sense for Littlefinger? And Littlefinger is interesting because, as In Deep Geek says, Littlefinger actually references the Faceless Men like multiple times in book 1. And so he seems to be very aware of them, at least. And so when we get to this idea of, okay, well, why does Littlefinger need to kill Ned? Well, for the whole story to tick from Littlefinger's point of view, he needs there to be a war between the Lannisters and the Starks. Ned had to die. That is the one thing that creates that event. Because if Ned is able to live, go to the Night's Watch, and live out his life at the Wall, the war probably doesn't happen, right? Because I think Ned would have talked some sense into Robb, and I don't think it would have gotten, as detailed as it did. Because once Ned had lost his head, Robb was basically hell-bent on revenge and trying to do justice and all these things. So Ned needed to die. And so I brought this up in the last stream, and I think this is an interesting point that also kind of, I think, pokes a hole in the theory a little bit, is that if Littlefinger was trying to get Ned killed, it's almost a backup plan, because when we see that Ned basically gets imprisoned, Joffrey then goes ahead and kills Ned, but that seems to be kind of brought on by Littlefinger's manipulation. Varys and Tyrion talk about that exact idea, and that does seem to be the case, right? Because Joffrey, I don't know if it would have been enough that, okay, the crowd is screaming, they want blood and all these things. That would have been the thing that shifted Joffrey. I think somebody like Littlefinger manipulating him makes a lot of sense. So, okay, then why hire the Faceless Men, right? If that's going to cost you a lot of money and it's like a backup plan. So that's the point that I think a lot of people would debate this theory, because does it make sense for Littlefinger to actually get a Faceless Man to kill Ned? And that would have cost a ton of money. Ned is the hand of the king. That would have cost a ton of money. Now, maybe Littlefinger could have been using the crown to finance this, right? As well as his own money as well. So kind of molding a bunch of things together to then pay for the Faceless Men. That could all be possible. Because again, when you think about, for instance, Jaqen, if he wanted to be there in the black cells for a reason, what is that reason? Who is he there to assassinate? It can't possibly be Rarge or Biter. Nobody's paying, a Faceless Man to kill them. That doesn't make any sense. Ned is the only other person in the black cells, and he makes sense. There is motivation from characters to do that. Or is it a fact of, okay, he wanted to be in this Night's Watch party, and he didn't want to volunteer because that would kind of seem kind of suspicious. And I agree with Robert from In Deep Geek on that. It would look very sus if somebody just was like, oh yeah, I'm going to, become part of the Night's Watch because of how horrible that life is. And so it makes more sense, or naturally, if he does, use the black cells to then go with Yorn and his party. But then what's the reason? Why does he want to be with Yorn's party? Is it because of Ned? Now, that was the public plan, that they were going to send him to the Wall. That's what Varys and Cersei had basically wanted the deal to be, all of that stuff. Okay, so possibly it was to kill Ned. The only other two people that are of any real note in that party are Gendry and Arya. The problem is those two candidates were very late additions. Jaqen would have had no knowledge that they would have been going north until basically he was already in the black cells, right? So that doesn't seem to make sense. So the last indication that I've seen people bring up here is that actually Jaqen was going to go to the north to the Wall because, he wanted more books. And right, we think about Sam at the Wall. He goes through all these books and things. He thought that maybe there could be dragon books there, or books that could be useful to him of some note. That's the only other reason why I could see him going, north. Plus, Littlefinger is seen in a vision, and he is like the Titan of Bravos. True. Again, there's a lot of things that indicate that this theory could be true, but it's not set in stone. And I think for the reasons I brought up is why I just don't know if I could fully say, yeah, this is what happened. It's one of those theories where I would lean towards it being true, that it is the theory proposed by In Deep Geek, but I can't say that it's not. Without reasonable doubt, it couldn't be that as well, right? It's like, if you're going to court and you have to judge on somebody, there has to be no possible explanation as to what they were doing, that crime wasn't, them, that they committed it. That's kind of how I view the theories, but yeah. Do we have an estimate on how much a Faceless Man hit costs? Well, it varies, and so that's the problem. If it's somebody that's a higher ranking official, more difficult to assassinate, you would assume, because of having guards and all these things, it's going to cost you a lot. And so, and that's something Littlefinger even states, right? When they are discussing, assassinations and things like that, he says it's very costly. Jaqen could have been there for a number of different reasons. You know, one could have been to scout out this court and see, you know, would they pay back their debts that they had, how would they be able to do those things, maybe looking for books and on dragons and magical things like that, a dragon egg. Well, so there could be a number of reasons that Jaqen was there outside of just an assassination that could have also occurred with what Jaqen was doing. Based upon he wants so badly this book in Oldtown, it makes sense that possibly there was no assassination thing going on. It was just straight up that Jaqen needed a reason to get to the north so that he could access these books. That could be very possible as well. And also, as we're going through again, if you guys have your theories of your own on this idea, let me know down in the chat, because it will be probably in the video. But yeah, unless Robert wanted Jaqen to kill Daenerys and Viserys, yeah, that could be possible as well. Maybe, you know, he was summoned there to, you know, do this hit, but then this hit gets canceled, and so now he's like, okay, well, let me, you know, get into the Night's Watch. There's a number of things that could have possibly been going on. But yeah, that is like my main thoughts on this idea, right? Of how Jaqen, or why Jaqen was at the Black Cells in King's Landing. If that's the case, if Jaqen had to kill Dany and Viserys, would this lead to Facelessmen trying to kill Daenerys later if she comes to Westeros? Could be, Xeno, right? Like, that could be Arya's mission. I've talked about this, and I have a video that's probably going to be going out next week that I'm going to be doing with JC on Arya. And, like, one of the big parts of it is she has to get some sort of assignment when she leaves Braavos. And one of those could be, like, killing Daenerys, for instance. And it would, like, make a lot of sense, given the history of the Faceless Men with the, you know, Valyrians. Make a lot of sense.